It is still Max Fun Drive, and you are about to hear a special, jam-packed episode of our show. This show is made possible by listeners just like you for as little as $5 a month. And if you'd like to get in on that fun and support Feeling Seen, head to MaximumFun.org/join. Thank you so very much, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies that make us feel seen. My co-host today is a legend, full stop. It is Peppermint. Peppermint is a multifaceted artist, actress, activist, and an all-around entertainer, and a self-proclaimed horror movie buff, which we will be getting into. You may have seen her in the Go-Go's-inspired musical Head Over Heels on Broadway, or on your TV screens as a frontrunner on Season 9 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Peppermint is back on your TV screens for Season 2 of Survival of the Thickest, starring alongside Michelle Buteau, Tasha Smith, and Garcelle Beauvais. It's a beautiful show that we love to watch and love to champion. Its second season just premiered, and you can stream it right now on Netflix. Peppermint joins us to talk about Survival of the Thickest, trans representation in media, zombies, Hollywood, and so much more. But first, roller coasters. You could have seen her in Call Me Mother. You could have seen her, seen or listened to her on her podcast, The Black Queer Town Hall with Bob the Drag Queen, The Traitor Season 2, the Netflix series Survival of the Thickest. Peppermint, the drag artists of the world are so multifaceted that what else should one know about you before we get started? I feel like the credits could just go on and on and on and on.
I love roller coasters and ice cream.
Is that a Coney Island situation? Like, where does a New Yorker go to satisfy roller coasters and ice cream?
I mean, ice cream is like the bodega.
Sure.
Luckily. But roller coasters, obviously It's more seasonal on the East Coast for sure. Coney Island, they have them.
My last roller coaster related question will be, given that you are a big fan of horror, did Final Destination change your relationship at all with roller coasters?
Only because, yes and no, because I still do them.
Yes.
But it did change, like the series of things that pops into my head before the roller coaster, before the ride starts. But that also changed my relationship. The Final Destination series changed my relationship to pretty much anything I do. I'm like, damn, should I really open the fridge right now? You know what I mean?
I am from the Pacific Northwest, and I was driving south from where I'm from, back down to LA with my wife, and we got behind a logging truck.
Oh, God. Don't stay behind this truck.
I took a photo of it and I did post it on Twitter, and I was like, a micro generation of people will know exactly the amount of anxiety I experienced during this, and the amount of people being like, I hope you didn't stay there. You had to move. You had to get around that truck. Like the solidarity of knowing.
And you did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you have to get around that truck. You get around the log truck.
Get around that truck. Oh, my God. Yeah, thank God I don't do tanning booths, but like... but anything, sitting under a sign, like
corrective laser eye surgery, going to a bridge. Mm-hmm.
Just wild.
Well, tell us a little bit before we get into our sort of backbone of the conversation. Tell us a little bit about Survival of the Thickest, the Netflix series, which you are on, created by Michelle Buteau.
Yeah, it's given that like the whole pushback in this country.
Yeah.
Against things like DEI, is no surprise because we are following the transgender tipping point, which kicked off famously, or was at least signified by Laverne Cox's appearance on the cover of Time magazine in 2012, with shows like Orange is the New Black and other fabulous shows like Transparent, and signified that like trans folks and of course LGBTQIA plus folks were having being celebrated in a way that we hadn't before, and having a level of visibility that we hadn't quite had in at least in film and television in Hollywood. And we know that media influence, we certainly know now that media, including film and television, but certainly social media and things, certainly influence the way people feel about each other in groups that they don't really know much about. And so that was really encouraging to me when I decided to continue with my acting career um, after having so many successes in drag and going on auditions and things like that, which I saw some success in over the past 5, 10 years. And I was really excited to get out there and start auditioning in film and TV. I was so discouraged to find out that a recent GLAAD report showed that post 2020, which was kind of really the starting point,
Right.
that LGBTQ characters and actors' roles, storylines were on a decline. And that kind of preceded where we are now.
Right, right.
So connecting all that, the pushback, which was like reached its sort of, I won't say its height, but was like solidified in 2023 after certain corporations pulled back from their Pride support. I was like, oh shit, maybe I don't want to be in Hollywood, and maybe I can't even be on a can of beer.
Mm-hmm.
Not that my goal was to be on a can of beer.
Right. I was listening to your town hall pod, and as you said to Bob, like, we weren't invented when Bud Light was invented. Like, trans folks did not spring out of Target when Bank of America started doing activations during June.
Yeah, they sure act like we were. Yeah, folks have a very just like no memory. But what I had was just so much joy after I had auditioned for this TV show that my agent was like, okay, there's a TV show. It's kind of like a really inclusive show, and you should audition for it. But here's the thing: before you read the sides, before you read the script to audition, you should know one thing. You're auditioning for a character that is a Black trans woman who also is a drag entertainer. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a coincidence. Great. I love that. That's very inclusive. And it obviously that speaks to my, experience.
Yeah, you know that story.
And she's like, well, there's another thing. Yeah. The character's name is Peppermint. And I was like, wait a minute now.
You're like, am I auditioning, or was something written for me? And this is a fun surprise?
Yeah. And I was like, well, what if I don't get the part? Who's going to get it?
Yeah. And is she changing her name?
Yeah, what is going on here? Obviously, I auditioned and I got it for this show called Survival of the Thickest, which is about a fabulous, fashionable lady who, after a terrible breakup, has to sort of reinvent her life. Folks who like shows like Sex and the City would, I think, like this. It's hysterical and it's really inclusive. It's really New York. I think it's pretty universal given how Black and queer it is, the show. Yeah, and it's headed up by Michelle Buteau, who is the main character, the star, the head writer. And yeah, I play Peppermint, who owns a drag bar in Brooklyn. So there's some things that aren't true. And it's sort of like her pal and her social media gal. And so we got picked up for season 2. And I'm really excited about it. It comes out in March, at the end of March 27th.
I mentioned horror before, in a genre that I know you're an enthusiast of. I was reading in an article recently. It was like, what do you do for to protect your peace and your mental health? And you were saying like, I like curl up and I have like a cup of tea and I watch horror movies.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get into the conversation of characters, which for you, like, in it completely, like, this has happened many times before. People coming back to me like, I don't really have a character. And it's like, okay, that is a great answer. And I want to dive into why that is not the case. And along the way, let's, have some anchor points where we can touch on what satisfied and what fell short in that progression. And starting with the horror movies you brought, you suggested both Return of the Living Dead and Sleepaway Camp. So were you an early adopter of horror? Has this something that's always been with you in your life, or did you come to this later?
I would say I was brought to it by my damn mom. And I was brought to it by life circumstances. My damn mom. I don't know why I'm saying my damn mom. And pop culture.
Mhm.
And so, being of the age that I am, growing up in the 80s, pop culture was undeniable. The force that was Michael Jackson and the force that was Thriller by Michael Jackson was undeniable. Like you were not going to be alive and not be exposed to Thriller. I don't know if I expressed an interest in these things or like I think my mom probably noticed that how I reacted to Thriller. I remember being like terrified by it. I had a babysitter that we watched Thriller for like I'd already seen Thriller for like third or fourth time by the time I had this babysitter and I were alone, obviously as a babysitter. And she was watching me and I love her. Her name was Sherelle. I thought she was so cool. And we'd watched Thriller and then it was time for bed. I don't know why we watched it right before bed, but I guess that's what you do. We watched Thriller. It was time for bed, and went in the bathroom, and she told me to go in and like get dressed or brush my teeth or whatever I was gonna do. I was like young. I was young. I was like less than 10. I must have been 6, 7, 8. And I come out of the bathroom, and I'm like, Sherelle, nothing. And I'm like, what's going on? And Sherelle, and I hear, doof, doof. And I'm like, oh my God. And here comes Sherelle creeping down the hall like a zombie. And I screamed and shut the door and was so scared. And she started banging on the door. And I was like, oh my gosh, my bartender, my babysitter turned into I went to the bartender. My babysitter turned into a zombie. What am I going to do? And I didn't know what to do. I was so scared in the bathroom. It was like that scene from The Shining. So scared. And then she, was like, just kidding. And like, I didn't trust her ever again.
Yeah.
So there was that.
You couldn't.
I also had a terrible moment with a millipede crawled up on when I was like 2. A millipede crawled like 1 inch from my face, and I guess I'd never seen it before. My mom said that I became a different person. And that horror, the real life horror and being scared and then screaming and like laughing at the same time. I think that just like became a thing and then sort of got me into horror.
Well, and there's, I feel like being a queer person watching horror, if you're interested in engaging with it from a multi-textual level, maybe not for like the nicest reasons, but like I feel like there is a sort of a benefit of a richer textual experience when you're watching them. Cause like there is that aspect of you have the monster, which it's so interesting to me to talk to queer fans of the genre because like it's seeing like depending on people's life experience, like do they identify with the melancholy of the monster or do they identify more with the rage of the monster? Like, do they see themselves as like Carrie before she nuked the gym in the movie, or do they see themselves as Carrie nuking the gym in the movie? And
that's a good question. I know the gay guys are in the Carrie nuking the gym.
It really that happens a lot. No, you are absolutely not wrong about that.
Who is uprising? It's the people that you are pushing out of society and out of your narratives. Those are the people that are going to come for you and uprise. And those are the people that are going to rebel. And all people rebel. And I think even if you can't think of, even for the people who are like get politics out, even for those people, they can certainly understand the notion of the haves and the have-nots and the hierarchy. And the simplest is like almost explicit in a horror film. The people who have the resources and the people who don't. The people who have acceptance in society and the ones who are the outcasts. The people who are the different ones. These are the stories that play out so clearly and that, not only horror films, but like most films like deal with these notions in some way, shape, or form. And so being able to connect it to the different groups of people that are minority groups, political groups, it's not a stretch. And if you get politics out of horror is to get humanity out of storytelling. And what do you have left? I don't know.
Yeah. Then you have AI slop that is taking over the internet. That's all you have left.
It's like Oh, what?
Well, tell me about it's such a fascinating text to consider through the lens of history, the sensation that it is, the controversy that it is, Sleepaway Camp. Tell me about your relationship with Sleepaway Camp, one of the movies that you suggested.
Sleepaway Camp is something that I avoided for the longest time. I mean, I love all horror. I respect all horror. I don't love all horror. I respect all horror. Horror is my favorite like category and or genre, and my favorite like subgenre of horror is zombie and like horde outbreak viral virus thing, whatever. I think my middle of the road that I'm kind of like I could take it or leave it is like slasher. And I think maybe I just didn't have enough time not I didn't have enough time. I went to camps a lot. So I
Oh, okay.
avoided the camp horror thing. Like at camp, I was like, okay, I'll watch something else. So Sleepaway Camp, I didn't really get into until I was an adult, saw it later, I think for the first time a few years ago. I was able to watch it more through an analytical lens as an
Right.
adult, like right away.
Hmm.
And so my relationship to it is as a Black trans woman who's watching a horror film to see how our stories were utilized, how our existences, it's not our story, how our existences were utilized and sort of exploited through film and television historically. And the part of the film or the part of the story that resonates with me so much, the avoidance to things like swimming and being in the locker room, not only being ostracized, but like at camp, avoiding things like bathing in public or like in the public setting and like my body, being examined by other people. The character of Angela, who's like the star, I
Yeah, yeah.
guess.
Nice shot. Say, Angela, we're all going down to the lake tonight, for a little swim. And, well, we were kind of wondering maybe if you wanted to join us or something.
A pro takeover. Listen, Angela, let's say, me and you go for a little walk somewhere. What do you talk about tonight, huh?
What's the matter? Can't you talk? I told you she was playing with half a deck. Angela the nutcake. Ain't that right, Angela? Ain't you Looney Tunes?
Because they're part of like the trickiness with Sleepaway Camp is I've seen many sort of like pieces breaking down like why like the Angela character as a non-trans figure, but that becomes representative of trans folks because of the reveal, because of the way just this person is a product of a desire outside of themselves to be shaped into a person, a little girl that they are not.
Hmm.
And it's a story of mental health and it's a story of disturbance and trauma in that way. But I think what it does, like, given the moment that we're in, what I think the movie has aged into as we watch these cyclical reactions to increasing visibility of actual trans folks in the world is that I think what it ends up being is it turns into this very interesting thing to graft onto where we see what happens when you create a trans villain out of no truth whatsoever. When you cherry pick pejoratives, when you take the scariest thing you can imagine and you put it into a vessel that is meant to embody your fears around this thing you don't understand, what you have is Angela as, I think, a very functional sort of metaphor for what happens if you do not take the truth of trans reality and actually make an effort to understand people, but you just make an amalgamation of queer villainy in the form of a trans body and put that on screen. And it's like, wow, that really is the process of making a trans villain, isn't it? Everybody else's opinion going into this thing, regardless of how much the reality of the person protests, and then people react with horror when the outcome that they have created in this sort of like Frankensteining process
plays out.
does something that like disrupts the peace of their world and their community.
100%. And I think that can be said for both like outside of the film in terms of like maybe perhaps the creators and their approach to creating this character of
Yeah.
Angela and writing this character of Angela, but then also within the story and the context of the film. And, you know, I have to, I mean, I have to bring myself to like, what would cause them to like, why this reveal at the end and why this, you know, I mean, you can connect the reveal at the end to obviously like the beginning, where in the beginning when the two kids like sort of swap, you know, like the boy turns into the girl like with the really bad screen dissolve. um and it's kind of, like, obvious that they're connecting, but like I'm like, why, what was in the mind of the, and I don't know what was in the, I never dove into the filmmakers and creators reasoning behind having Angela, you know, be revealed at the end, and what the significance really is or was of this beyond
Mhm.
the trauma and the mental anguish of the family and the child at the beginning after after the accident beforehand. And so is it their obsession with the trans body and I won't say the transgender person, because right now we think of trans people and we are able to connect trans people to a sort of their own autonomy and mental state, their own connection to their body and their gender expression and their thoughts about their gender expression. That's how we can think of a trans person today. But I think historically we only thought of trans people through the lens of like their body only and their body parts only, and sort of like
Totally.
as a transsexual. It doesn't matter what they feel, but this is the body parts that they have, which it's a surprise they got the body part. Whoa. And how do we feel about that? Doesn't matter how they feel about that. We don't even care how they feel about that. It's just like, what does that do to us? I think it was a cheap trick and a cheap shot, but like I appreciate the fact that they were using all the other things what they were using to communicate about the character speaks so much to the experience that I have and have had as a trans person. You know, like my relationship to bathing suits. When I went to go film The Traitors, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna surprise and throw you in the lake, and you have to have a bathing suit." I was like, "No, I can't just be surprised in a bathing suit. Like,
Right.
there's certain things I have to do as a trans woman, or certain things that I would like to do, not have to do, to be prepared to be in a bikini." I mean, a lot of people aren't just like surprised, prepared to be in a bikini. That's a horror film in its
Sure.
own. But
Most people's bodies are not objects of political resistance by the very fact of their nature.
hello.
So you have
And
some extra
so,
considerations to make.
yeah, and a couple of considerations to make. And so like I need some extra time to prepare to be in that. And I know that's what, you know, I remember I had you know, not to get too personal, but I decided to be fancy and free and put on a new bathing suit with I don't even know if it was friends. I was with one friend.
Uh-huh.
We went to the city pool in my neighborhood, bunch of strangers, way too many kids. And I was in the pool, and I thought that I was just going to not prepare as thoroughly as one would. And I was like, let me just throw this on and jump into the pool.
Mhm.
And I jumped into the pool, and simultaneously, the two things that I would have never wanted to go wrong went wrong. Something went wrong with my bathing suit. Something went wrong with my like general appearance and my hair, all at the same time when I jumped in the pool. And I was under the water, and I knew that like it was like one of those city pools where like it's 4 feet,
Yeah.
and you think, why is there no deep end in this pool? And there's 800 kids all rambunctious, and they're all minding their business, but they will notice.
Yeah.
And I was under the water, and I was further away from the things that would protect me than I wanted to be, because they had come off my body. Let's just say that. And I was under the water, suffocating, reaching for the things that were floating on the water that I needed to protect myself. And I said to myself, I'm going to drown. And if I drown before I get these things back on my body, I'm gonna drown. And I said, I'm willing to, I can't, I was like, I can't believe I was willing to risk, not that I can't believe, but I was like, how sad is it that I was willing to risk my life and drown in 4 feet rather than have the public ostracization
Mm-hmm.
that would happen as a result of people being able to see me as something other than, how I really saw myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what I imagine Angela was going through when they were getting ready to throw her in the lake,
Right.
or when she didn't want to shower, or when she wasn't going to put on her bathing suit, and that fucking bitch, Judy,
Yeah.
always coming around. Pardon my French.
It's time for a break, but we will be right back with Peppermint on a medley of movies from horror to camp. But first, I want to talk to you about Max Fun Drive and some canonically queer bonus content. Cue up that canonically queer BOCO pledge. Max Fun has a library full of special bonus content you can enjoy from all of your favorite Max Fun shows. It's gotten to be a pretty big library over these many years, and you can access that whole library of content every single Max Fun show when you join at just $5 a month or more. Within the bonus content, some of them are team-ups between Max Fun hosts or with special guests, and there are some interesting topics and extended versions of episodes. And a really cool thing that we got to do with the bonus content this year is bring in Danielle Cuesius, who has been a production fellow at Maximum Fun for really the past year. And then at the end of 2024, he joined into the Feeling Seen fold officially as producer Marissa stepped away, taking care of personal matters, because we are a family, we help each other out. And then in steps Danielle Cuesius to be guiding this show these past few illustrious, magnificent months. And actually, he is here to tell you more about that now.
From production fellow to producer on Feeling Seen. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about Maximum Fun is the fact that we have a production fellowship. So many great producers that we still have in-house that work on shows that you love have come up through Maximum Fun's production fellowship.
And it's a really amazing opportunity to see people get to grow within an organization like that and within a company that puts its money where its mouth is in terms of supporting the folks that it brings in and develops. A lot of times you got to leave and come back to a place in order for them to take you seriously as the next level up of professional order. And you can support an organization that makes these kinds of integrity-based choices.
And we also have some really great bonus content that is involving our pin from this year. Our pin is very Beetlejuicy. I think of it as Beetlejuicy Couture. Our canonically queer pin. We are talking about some of the gayest characters in film history. And by chance, that happens to mean to me Magneto and Nightcrawler from X-Men 1 and X-Men 2.
Taking these texts of big box office supremacy and dissecting from the point of millennials coping with toxic media environments who are still able to find themselves within the lines of text of these box office hits, that means they reach so many people, their messages reach so many people, and then we get to do things like break down those experiences on the show with people who were watching through their own unique lenses, and that informs later on how they watch like any media or all media, and if they go on to create it, it informs the creators that they become, and then they put new work out into the world, and that is influencing others to then form these their own kinds of incredible takeaways, like here's why I connect to Nightcrawler in X-Men 2 played by Alan Cumming.
Sometimes we go deep and we talk about Alan Cumming's layered Catholicism. And sometimes we go pretty shallow and talk about Ian McKellen's sass.
Yeah. And that is something that is, the pin is canonically queer, so is the bonus content, but just so is the show. Like, we are a very queer show, My maybe one of my top three favorite things about myself is I'm a queer person. That is a kind of joy and privilege I get to have moving through the world with that lens. And we are super proud of the fact that we get to have a show on the air here at Maximum Fun that communicates to people from, one little tiny niche of that experience on my end to the great and grand kaleidoscope of versions of those experiences of the people that I get to talk to for every episode.
Now, if you want to go on this gay hero's journey with us, all you have to do is go to MaximumFun.org/join. That's MaximumFun.org/join. You get access to this bonus content along with so much bonus content from all of our other shows at Maximum Fun. This one was really exciting, and we hope that you're enjoying the incredibly queer guests that we are having on during Fun Drive.
So come on now, MaximumFun.org/join. You've heard it before. We'll say it again, MaximumFun.org/join. Join, upgrade, or boost today. Now, tell me what about zombie movies are especially resonant for you? Why is that the subgenre that you feel like especially attached to? And of all the dead movies, why Return of the Living Dead presented for this conversation?
I mean, I have to admit that, yes, the connection that I have to zombie movies and sort of human takeover fascinates me in the same way that I think other queer folks, certainly trans folks that I've spoken with about these things are connected and fascinated to these genres and to these films. And so I'd have to think, I want to accept that it's just the same connection. Like we all do have a fascination to these things. Since my favorite genre is zombie, I don't over-examine it too much.
Fair.
To kind of let it be pure reaction.
Okay, then give me your pure reaction to Return of the Living Dead.
I mean, for real, I think on the surface level, this sort of motley crew of, misfits, people that there was only one person in the group, I think, that felt like would have been acceptable, like the jock sort of person. There was only one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why is he with these nerdy people that are what is going on? Everyone else was utter reject, which I loved because I was like, I'm a part of this group.
That's Tina's.
I think the girl who fully strips down and dances in the cemetery is literally named Trash.
Yeah, her name is Trash.
At some point, someone's like, where are Trash and Suicide?
Yeah, exactly. Trash, Suicide. I mean, I can't remember his name. Reggie, the black guy. Of course, that's like every black guy's name in the 80s.
Where the fuck you going? Help me by the door. Stupid fuck.
He was not so much of a nerd, but I was like, I think when I was younger, I was like, why is Reggie with this group? Because he seems cool.
Yeah.
But clearly, okay, it's his race that relegates him, I guess, maybe in this, Kentucky filmed in downtown Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that they were outcasts and the freaks was my initial connection to it and reaction to it. I love the fact that these folks have to be these folks that are different, even demonstrating, even all being outcasts, but the differences amongst them, Trash being so sex forward and maybe positive, I guess.
She spends at least half the movie bottomless, at least.
Yeah, at least, and then just puts on a top, but her vagina is out. Sitting on that cemetery ground, I'm like, girl,
No, when she falls in the rising dead water, mud puddle amidst the torrential toxic rainstorm of corpse reanimating gas, and her she's bottomless. My first, it was just oh, everything's in, it's all going
it's
in now.
It's in your body. It's in your body.
Yeah.
I was like, girl. That is like the first thing I would have not even covered my boobs as much as like all of my orifices.
Yes.
If it was, they had already established that it was like acid rain.
Yeah.
Or like
people are like,
something
my
in the
skin
rain.
is burning. Like you hear people saying that.
Girl, cover your cooch. Anyway, I think, is that Linnea Quigley? I think it is.
Oh my God.
You know, was in love with her because I was like, this woman is empowered. She doesn't care what anybody says.
Mm-hmm.
It's like bodily autonomy to the max. Like she's in control. She's doing her own thing. Yes, she's dancing. Yes, she was putting on a show, but it didn't feel as though it was it felt like it was for herself. It was for liberation. It goes
past the point where anybody's interested in what's happening.
Yeah.
And people are like, where are your, like, people are like, oh, okay,
people are like not even interested. She's like, this is me, bitch.
She even tries to like go flirt with the guy who's like got the huge gauge chain between his nose and his ear, and she's like trying to make a move on him, and he's like, "Get off me!" He's like,
"Go get dressed. Have some respect.
Have some respect for the dead." And he's like, "What do you think? These clothes are just a costume? I'm trying to say something here." And you're like, oh my God, what is this moment with naked trash and like the punk coming to like having his moment of realization in the cemetery right now? And you know what I think is an interesting thing about this movie and her is that she's like, you know, there's the moment where she like starts taking her clothes off and you're kind of like, okay, horror movie, you know, boobs out kind of thing. But the camera does absolutely nothing to linger on her.
It doesn't. She's not objectified in this. She's almost empowered.
As objective as it could possibly be, just as like a wide shot of her doing what she's doing. And we're never meant to like, we're never told by the camera to look at certain parts of her.
Yeah, it's not a Porky's or a Revenge of the Nerd.
No.
Sort of, you know, here's some titties just for the sake of seeing nudity.
Exactly. There's a very fun exhibitionism about Return of the Living Dead.
You know what? There is. And the other thing that I think is pretty cool is now that we're talking about it, there's not the morality piece that we learn in like, you know, the Halloweens and the Friday the 13th of like the party kids get killed. I mean, like in this zombie, everybody's fair game.
Right, yeah.
And so it's not because they're partying. It's none of those things. It's just because of like government corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's why there's like this, you know, the army is using these like these chemical weapons that they're hiding in places that they shouldn't be hiding. That's why we're having this thing, not because of the kids having sex.
Yeah, and like, and I think it's Freddie, the boy who works in the medical supply store, like the himbo who accidentally sets off like a chemical warfare situation. Like he's dating the really, really preppy girl that's hanging out with these group of like grave hanging out pals who look like sort of common punks. And then she goes in to save him. And like you said, nobody's really off limit. And the movie ends with a nuclear bomb being dropped.
Before she even gets killed. So she's kind of the final girl, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Insofar as this movie will give you any of that.
Well, let me just say why Return of the Living Dead also is because of its camp and comedy of it.
Yes,
is a camp aspect of Return of the Living Dead that doesn't really necessarily exist with the other Romero films, Night of the Living Dead, or even, you know, I mean, the purest of which is not on there, but like of the zombie films that I love so much is the 2003 remake of Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, the Zack Snyder one.
Yes, because like we get these fast zombies, which kind of, you know, correlates with like the 28 Days Later fast zombies. But Return of the Living Dead is uniquely campy. And I remember like it's like it's comedy, but it's not telling us it's comedy.
Yeah.
Like it's questionable if it's comedy, but like juxtaposed to like Shaun of the Dead, which is like obviously a comedy, but
yeah, it's a comedy first. That's a comedy.
It's a comedy movie first, but it's equally as good and effective as a zombie movie. So I think that's why I love Return of the Living Dead so much, because it's like it's light and it's campy, but it's also very scary.
Well, and I was wondering about that, like, in terms of like somebody who would go on to work in a field of artistry that is as big as drag, and in your drag performances, it's more of like it's more of a grounded glamour, and with a movie like this, with horror genre kind of throughout if you're growing up as like a Gen Xer or a millennial, we grew up with like big horror in the 1980s, splashy slashers, like if you like the stuff that we were sort of raised on, those sleepover movies. There was not a lot of the innuendo was sort of checked at the subtlety was checked at the door. And so I wanted to hear from you about like a Return of the Living Dead and two movies that you mentioned, Clue and Mannequin, being these like flashy, opulent movies. I wanted to hear, like, as somebody consuming these as a young person who goes on to work in a kind of like at its face extravagant art form, and the process of that, like, sort of working into your like amalgamation of influences.
Clue.
One of my favorite episodes we have done about this show is when we talked about Mr. Green in Clue.
Oh my gosh. I mean, one of my favorite things about Clue is Yvette's reaction to Mr. Green's unintentional reaction to Mr. Body's, Tim Curry's, declaration or storytelling about his wife, at the same time as Mrs. Peacock's reaction to his wife being a socialist. When she simultaneously gasps as the, consummate capitalist governor's wife, he thought that you were all truly un-American. And Mr. Green, seated as the outcast, not being able to find a spot on any of the couches, because he tries on every couch and then has to sit, clears the drink table, the little drink desk, sits on the drink desk, and then the drink desk collapses when being talked about being un-American. And Yvette reacting in such horror.
It's still perfect comedy.
So it's perfect. It's perfect.
When I said that I was Mr. Body's butler, this was both true and misleading. I was once his butler, but it was not his untimely death this evening that brought my employment with him to an end.
When did it come to an end?
When my wife decided to end her life. She too is being blackmailed by this odious man who now lies dead before us. He hated my wife for the same reason that he hated all of you. He believed that you were all thoroughly un-American.
Sorry?
For some reason, he felt that it was inappropriate for a senator to have a corrupt wife, for a doctor to take advantage of his patients, for a wife to emasculate her husband, and so forth.
But this is ridiculous. If he was such a patriotic American, why didn't he just report us to the authorities?
He decided to put his information to good use and make a little money out of it. What could be more American than that?
And as, of course, Leslie Ann Warren giving the best Susan Sarandon performance that Susan Sarandon never gave.
That is perfectly described.
I mean...
Well, to be perfectly frank, I run a specialized hotel and a telephone service which provide gentlemen with the company of a young lady for a short while.
Oh, yeah? What's the phone number?
So how did you know Colonel Mustard works in Washington? Is he one of your clients?
Certainly not.
I was asking Miss Scarlett.
Well, you tell him it's not true.
It's not true.
Is that true?
No, it's not true.
Ha-ha! So it is true.
A double negative. Double negative? You mean you have photographs?
I think I was all the women in that movie. Wanted to be all the women in that movie. Certainly I was like, I'm all the women in that movie. I'm all the women in that movie. There's nothing else to say. But as a madam and a sex worker, I love that. Really resonated with me very early on. It's like her like not really caring about like the judgment of like the people around her, and her ownership and her knowledge that like all of these men, or some of these men, or various times would have been or would have liked to have been utilizing her services.
Of course.
And the power of that, I just think, was just so wonderful and delicious and so empowering for me. And Mrs. White, the fact that she was able to see men as use them as a tool, and for whatever her purposes or what she needed, and not really caring about killing them, and like, what? They're just disposable. You know,
He wasn't a very good illusionist.
He wasn't a very good illusionist. Love that. You know.
Mrs. White, you've been paying our friend the blackmailer ever since your husband died under, shall we say, mysterious circumstances.
Why is that funny?
I see. That's why he was lying on his back in his coffin.
I didn't kill him.
Then why are you paying the blackmailer?
I don't want a scandal, do I? We had had a very humiliating public confrontation. He was deranged. He was lunatic. He didn't actually seem to like me very much. He had threatened to kill me in public.
Why would he want to kill you in public?
I think she meant he threatened in public to kill her.
No, that's the experience. That just exclaiming yes is the experience of watching. And everybody's, like, the amount of movies that you could have made, I would imagine, just from the edits to different cutaways to people reacting to things. Like,
the reaction.
Oh, I was so excited when you suggested Mannequin, because the first gay character I can ever remember clocking on screen was Hollywood.
Ow! Well, roll over Bill Shakespeare. That is the sweetest sentiment these ears have ever heard.
No. I was rehearsing a play.
I always find it best not to explain. It adds a certain mystique to one's reputation.
No. I'm a regular kind of guy, okay?
Don't disappoint me. When you're finished with your conversation, please bring her to window number 3.
Sure, you got it. I'm Jonathan Switcher.
Hollywood Montrose. Doesn't it just sing?
Oh, it sings, yeah.
I'm a window dresser here. We're going to have fun. I am so glad you're working here.
You are?
Why, of course I am, honey. I never thought they'd hire anyone stranger than me.
But was never just in classic 80s form.
Yeah.
We never see him in a romantic setting. He doesn't talk about his sexuality. He's just, and that's just so interesting and shows you that, like, most of, like, so much of our identity, or like the judgment of our identity from the outside, is all about, like, just like how we exist and how we are read in the world. Not even our romantic choices, or who we love or whether we have love. No idea about Hollywood. All we know is that Hollywood is flamboyant and clearly not sticking to gender norms. And that is the big piece. And Hollywood, I love Hollywood.
He still to this day is one of my favorite queer characters of all time. And I obviously, like, I have an affinity.
Unsung.
He is unsung. And, like, there's nothing controversial about Hollywood. He is just simply completely who he is and steals every scene that he's in.
Every single scene he's in. Like, Hollywood just is, like, was, I think, the voice of the audience in the movie, in Mannequin. And so I think it forces the audience to identify, like, the character that's the most, that reacts to all the stuff that's happening around them. Judging, well, what are you doing there? And, like, it's Hollywood. And so the audience is forced to identify with Hollywood, this obviously gay queer character who's so flamboyant. You can't identify with any of these other people.
Yeah.
It's Hollywood who is the voice of the audience in this film. And I love that because it positions Hollywood in this sort of position, into a position of power, and not as a victim, not to be judged. You know, the only person who judges Hollywood in the movie is the
mall cop villain.
The mall cop, who's like the loser of the film.
Yeah, who we're all rooting against.
Who is the villain.
Yeah.
That's the only person who judges Hollywood.
Well, and it, like, I remember the first time I experienced Andre Leon Talley on America's Next Top Model, and I immediately thought of Hollywood.
That's Hollywood, of course.
Like the tall commanding presence, and like the singular outfits. And so, like, and I was just immediately endeared to this figure where I just, like, I grew up with, I grew up around drag queens a bit. My grandparents were friends with quite a number of drag queens in the Portland area of Oregon. They owned a couple of beauty schools. So they had a number of their beauty school students were drag queens in the area. And so I remember when I Snickers LaBar, Jerry Calleonen, he was around the house a lot. Shouts out to you, Jerry.
I love that. I don't know Snickers, but hello, Snickers.
Snickers Labar. He was a wonderful, sweet man. And yeah, and just I remember seeing Hollywood and like I felt so much like affection for this person that like he reminded me of the people my grandparents hung out with.
Whether I see myself as Hollywood or not, there's some of Hollywood in all of us, and certainly inside of me as well.
Well, and so like the last thing that I wanted to make sure we didn't leave behind, like there was Soldier's Girl, Showtime original movie, and there was, if you were a millennial or Gen Xer, like coming up in like the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, you had a slate of like somber crier offerings of like gay life.
The imagination is the most powerful force known to mankind, and it is my imagined self, the one who is beautiful and loving and worthy of being loved, that has been my guiding force, my inspiration. I can only hope to become the person Barry imagined me to be. I pray for the courage it will take to become a real, live Soldier's Girl.
And it was like there was this incendiary movement of new queer cinema that was very punk and very angry, in coming in like the surge of the AIDS crisis and more awareness of that, the Red Ribbon campaigns. And then it was like, and then then getting into the later 90s, it was like, and these are humans and these stories are touching. And it was like, we know that there are some edges on those Greg Araki movies, but if you wanted to watch something and feel, there were movies like Soldier's Girl and Boys Don't Cry and If These Walls Could Talk.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating time to be able to watch like television movies.
It was. And, you know, especially considering that like there are so many reasons and ways to sort of, I mean, I guess everything is fair game for criticism and analysis.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many ways to analyze these films now, you know, through a modern lens. But what they were doing, what they were offering and trying to do was humanize us and draw sympathy to our community, deservedly so, through these, in half of the films we talked about, true accounts, things that had actually happened.
Yeah.
Like Matthew Shepard and Soldier's Girl. And for me, what I had never seen before, contrary to like in Sleepaway Camp, was someone romantically pursuing a gender expansive person, trans person in the case of Soldier's Girl, who was aware of it and was like, I don't care, this is what I'm choosing.
Right, yeah.
And I thought, and I love that. And I felt like, oh my God, it's possible. I mean, mind you, this same era that you're talking about was the height of the popularity of shows like Jerry Springer in the late 90s.
Yes.
Where they had fallen into their mojo and their formula for bringing people on, lots of people, and exploiting them, but especially trans people, to have them profess their love to their partners, albeit some of it might have been staged, all of it may have been staged, but the reaction of the instance of a trans person saying something like, I love you, being met with a blow upside the head by a chair.
Yeah, by a
from their
fucking
partner,
hockey fight on
violence.
the floor. Yeah.
The reaction to I love you is violence and bodily harm to an obviously femme person who in any other situation would be, according to the social rules that we have, at least deserving of protection from this type of bodily harm, being cheered on by the audience like it's a boxing match, was horrific to me and sent such a message that Soldier's Girl was able to be a remedy to that for me. And I was really thought was beautiful.
Well, and I guess like having to like bring it all down into like our conversation into like a conclusion, I guess my question would be, do you feel like in lieu of being able to point to one like a single avatar for yourself and like growing up with surrounded by media, and do you feel like you are in a place now where you have been able to and are in a position to even further create a roadmap for somebody growing up in a similar circumstance to you that was unavailable to you, but that you could perhaps be for them? Do you feel like you have the tools, and do you feel like you have, even in this embattled time, the ability in the way that you want to make a roadmap for the young Peppermints out there?
Yes, I have a way to make a roadmap going back, even for the young Peppermints who would have grown up through the 80s, the time period. Obviously, anybody who's with us now who grew up during that time period, they made it here. Those are the tools and the types of tools and the things that I would be pulling from even modern day, or like the media that we have today. So it is possible to survive. And I guess that also speaks to the Peppermints of the future, knowing that there's a world where they're going to be taking some of the tools that we have access to and some of the things that we fought for and some of the rights and things that they're banning us from and limiting us from, and the books that they're banning and the things that we can still make it through. I made it through when we didn't have that book, when we didn't have these movies, when we didn't have these characters.
Yeah.
This is how it was an amalgamation. I had to piece it together. When my number one queer icon growing up was Prince, not because he was gay, but because he was so obviously fighting against gender norms and stereotypes, especially for a Black man. And so you can find it. And Prince was as queer and then unapologetically fabulous as anybody. He was walking around in purple high heels.
Yeah.
And lacy black. You could never call what Prince was wearing a shirt. It was a blouse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is possible to find those things even in lieu of, and when you're lacking some of the more obvious tools. It sucks because I want to be able to provide those things, and I do believe in art as activism, and I think that we did see that in Sleepaway Camp, even if it was unintentional. We did see that.
That's the thing. Once it hits the audiences, it belongs to us.
You can't unsee it. It's ours. It's there. We're telling you what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether you wrote it that way or not. It can exist. It will exist. Art will continue. And we will still have those things. That's for the Peppermints of the futures. For the Peppermints of the present, I say learn about these things while we still have access to the tools.
Yes.
And I'm going to do my best to continue to bring these sort of things as overtly as possible, which is why, you spoke about my drag, and my drag is sort of an extension, and I think speaks to the acting roles that I choose and the how I like to exercise my art and express my art. Is very overt and very direct because I had to do so much. Well, is that really putting together? And I don't want people to have to do that kind of work just to find somebody that they resonate with. I want it to be front and center. I want the Black queer person to be like, I am Black and queer, and this is what I have a problem with, and that should be a line in the movie. And so I want to write those things in. I want to be able to provide those things in the art while we still can. So that's why I make the choices that I make in my drag. It's straightforward. I remember some of my first music in drag was like hinting at, and I was like, no, I'm going to write it into the song explicitly. So my next few songs, my next few albums in drag, even before I was on Drag Race, were very directly addressing gender and sexuality in a way that I hadn't before. Transness, in a way that I hadn't before. And I brought that into my music, and then eventually into the roles that I chose in acting, because I went to school for acting, but like I was told that I would never be able to have a future in it because they want writing roles for that. I was like, well, shit, I'm going to find them and we'll do it.
Right.
That's why I'm so grateful for things like Survival of the Thickest, because it is very explicit. It's like, here we are, and it's just a matter of fact, just the way that Trash was. She was just a naked girl walking around the cemetery. That is weird as hell.
Yeah.
But here she is. And so that is what we're doing in Survival of the Thickest, not naked in the cemetery. Like, we are just we are not the problem. We are the rule in this world, not the exception. And the exception is all the assholes and the villains who come into the story who do fit into the norm, who are the typical people. And that is why, I think that is how I can connect all those two things to my life.
Like Hollywood came before you, you're just living fabulously. That's simply what it is.
Oh.
Well, Peppermint, thank you so much for this sprawling conversation that you let me go like longer outside of the time that was established. And it was just such a privilege to get to talk to you about so many pieces of pop culture, several of which are pieces of my favorite pop culture as well. This has been an absolute privilege.
I am I was so excited to hear that you and I had some of this thing, like that you are a horror fan and buff. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so fantastic. So Jordan, thank you so much. I'm so happy. I definitely feel very seen.
Our biggest thanks to Peppermint for really our biggest episode, and for such a truly amazing interview. It was such a pleasure to talk about so many movies with an icon. You can watch Peppermint right now on Survival of the Thickest on Netflix. Its second season just premiered, and it's an absolute must-watch. You can also keep up with all things Peppermint on social media. We will link to those handles in the show notes. And now that one quick thing before I go, it's Max Fun Drive. Feeling seen it's like one of my favorite things I get to do in my life, guys. It is such a special opportunity to talk to so many really cool people about stuff that matters to them, and that anybody out there listening right now is the reason that it is able to happen. And if any of you are not Max Fun members yet, we would love for you to join and support our show. And if you already are, you can boost that membership, because it feels a lot of the time like the people that we're lucky enough to have on this show are voices that we need to be platforming and projecting louder than ever before. So I hope you will join me in the mission statement of feeling seen. And if you have felt seen by us, head to MaximumFun.org/join to support the show. It means so much to have you in our corner, helping us to create this program. It is quite literally impossible to do it without you. So thank you, and please and thank you. And that is our show. You can keep up with us wherever you get your podcasts, and you simply must, hit the follow button wherever you're listening to get every new episode in your feed as soon as it drops. Why would you want to be behind? Follow us to find out more on Instagram at Feeling Seen Pod. We are also on Blue Sky, me as well as the show. You can search either Feeling Seen or Jor Crew. That's JORCRU, which is me, same as it always is, on Twitter, on Blue Sky as well. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Danielle Quasius. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun. Happy Max Fun Drive, and thank you for listening.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.